Hold your applause. Hold your applause. Well, thank you so much. That was very kind. Just wish I didn't have to ask for it. So some of you may know by now that I'm really just some guy, and I keep showing up partly because I happen to be the Economic Development Director for the Economic Development Foundation. And I know what you're all thinking. What the hell does that mean, and why does it have anything to do with poetry? Well, someone much smarter than me talked about this once, and I wrote it down. So I'm going to tell you exactly what it means. The best economist is the economist who knows deeply what it is to fear, hope, desire, need, love, and live, and to be the subject of the systems that economic sciences studies. To not know deeply what it is to fear, hope, desire, need, love, and live is to not know what it is to be that which economic science studies. Humanity. Who's the poet now? Stephen Delbos. Actually, I'll tell you, it was Brendan Markey Tower who actually said this, and I'm quoting him. He goes on to say that is why poetry is somewhere between vitally important and utterly necessary for the economist. Poetry shows us what it is to be what we study. Now, I say this because Economic Development Foundation Board of Directors, we have a member here tonight, Matt Muratori. Hold your applause.
Not yet.
One of the first projects that we undertook when I took on this role 5 years ago was to create the Poet Laureate program, for really no other reason than to showcase exactly what Plymouth has to offer. And partly because of another quote from someone else who's also smarter than me, John Adams. Some of you who have been in the room before have heard me say this, but when he was a minister in France, he was taunted and teased by the aristocrats for being interested in things like war and politics. And he said that he only studies those things so that his sons can, he said specifically sons, but I'm sure he would have meant daughters contemporaneously, right? But the fact is, he only studied those things so that his children could have the liberty to study things like mathematics and philosophy, so that their children could later study things like poetry and painting and porcelain. That is a roadmap to a complex society, to a complex economy. And you only get to the latter elements if you have the preceding elements first. Plymouth is 400 years old. We've seen everything that this country has to offer. And the last thing we had to introduce into our economy was the arts economy, the poetry. Now, when I presented this to the board, and especially to Matt, who's absolutely paying attention, one of the things that we talked about.
You're feeling needy tonight.
I'm just teasing Matt because he's also a member of our board. But one of the things that we talked about was not only the need to help bring people into businesses during off hours, right? We've done poetry readings on Tuesday nights at small businesses, and those businesses have reported to us that it was their highest grossing night ever in some cases. That's because of you. And the fact is, another quote I like to mention is that good poets need good audiences. We've proven that we have the great audiences and we have the great poets. And one of the most compelling things about creating this program, and especially in working with Stephen Delbos, our Poet Laureate for the last 4 years, is that Stephen has recited poetry in places like the Sorbonne in Paris, in London, in Amsterdam, in Prague, in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Right? Yes, I want to hear applause for that. So I intimately recognize none of you are here to see me tonight or to hear from me. So I will leave you with this. I want to thank you all for being the great audience to prove the point that we are ready for this evolution in our economy. And I want you to give one more round of applause, not just for yourselves, but also to show to Matt Muratori, to bring back to my board, that we are ready to evolve this program and to involve more types of things with our Poet Laureates, America's Poet Laureate nonprofits. So let's hear it. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce to you my friend and my colleague who I duped into doing this 4 years ago. I promised her it would be not more than, 2 days a month, 15 minutes at a time. But because of the success of the program, when we were talking more recently, we decided that this needs to evolve into an actual nonprofit. And Jennifer will tell you a little bit more about the AHL, but I want to thank you all for making this a successful program, because 4 years ago we did this as a project, and now it is a self-sustaining nonprofit that is well-funded and consistently garners this kind of quality of crowd, not just to our small businesses, but also to places like Plymouth, Patuxent, to draw attention to this wonderful asset that we have in this community. Jennifer, thank you for being our president, and thank you so much for all the hard work you do to make this a successful program.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. It's been fun having two Stephens, Stephen Cole and Stephen Delbos. Sometimes I just go S. Delbos or S. Cole. So that's going to change after tonight there. So welcome, everyone. You know I'm Jennifer Harris. Many of you know me as the retired library director, Plymouth Public Library, very proudly served for 27 years. And I have found a way to do my love of programming and events and poetry and cultural programming specifically throughout Plymouth through America's Hometown Laureates, Inc., which is a nonprofit that, thank goodness, he put together, although now I find we have to do IRS 990s. So I knew nothing about that. So one of the fun parts...
IRS loves poetry, folks.
It's one of the fun parts about going into new adventures in retirement is you get to learn. So what I've learned is partly that I love doing this, and there's so many avenues throughout Plymouth. That's why we did come to Plymouth Patuxent Museums. It's an opportunity to show off some of our greatest assets within Plymouth. And as a result of that, we have put together tonight's finalist, Meet the Finalists. And we do have a couple things coming up. I did type up a list somewhere, which of course I forgot to bring up here. But just so you're aware, through grants, Mass Cultural Council, Plymouth Cultural Council, the Town Promotions Fund, we have been able to bring some exciting events and plan to continue. So April, after this event tonight, we intend to make a decision, our board, which includes Elizabeth Jewett-Shanahan, or is it Shanahan-Jewett? That's another thing about retirement. Remembering names is always a challenge. We have Melissa Kinney with us also, and we have Glenda Richards and Amy Naples with the Chamber, and Stephen Cole, and we will be bringing on our retired poet laureate, Stephen Delbos. So am I remembering everyone and myself? So we'll make a decision in the next couple weeks. We will announce the winner through social media, initially in March. And then in April, we're planning on April 11th to have a celebration for this new poet laureate. It will be at some local business to be announced. And now most of you are on our mailing list, so you'll hear the announcements. We also have the Plymouth Public Library is hosting a local authors event on April 13th, where the new laureate will be speaking. We have been approached by some folks who go into the local corrections facility, and they want to work with poetry and inmates, and we'll have the new poet laureate working with them. We also have some access to some venues in Kingston and Duxbury. So we're spreading with all this grant work that we're doing and building up this audience. We're having fun with it. And I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of young poets. So enough about that. I would like to, at this point, shift the program over to some celebration of Stephen Delbos as his farewell performance tonight. We have asked our legislative delegation, Representative Matthew Moratori, Representative Kathy Lenatra, will present. If they would come up on stage, please. Senator Moran was not able to attend, and Derek Brandisi, our town manager, regretfully will not be able to attend. So we're counting on our favorites. Thank you. Come up. And I believe you want Stephen to come up, please. This is Senator Moran. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah.
Can we do both?
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
So, oh my God, there's a lot of good friends here. Got PAC TV in the house here. That's wonderful. Got Denise McAferry here. Hi, Melissa. How are you? Good. These are all the doers you got in the room, Stephen. These are people in Plymouth that do all the work here. And it's great to be here. We're really honored to be here. And just real quickly, when this was brought to our attention by Stephen, as he indicated, I'm actually on the Plymouth Area Economic Foundation 5 years ago when he brought this to us. I was also I was about 4 or 5 years into my term as state rep, and I was on the tourism committee. So I understand the tourism part of why, we were going to do this, but I didn't understand the economic part of it, why we were going to do this. And as Stephen said, this is one of his first acts as executive director, and I think a bunch of us said afterwards, like, did we pick the right guy for this job? What is he talking about? But you know what? He explained it as eloquently as he does everything, to the full satisfaction of the entire board, that it was unanimous to do this. And everything he said and more has happened from the economic development part of this, of what's happened. And that's when I personally started learning about how tourism and economic development actually merge and marry together. And thank you, Stephen, for that knowledge and providing that to me. And ever since that point, because of you, because we brought you on board, we are better legislators here in this area because of that, because we understand really what tourism and economic development really means to the area. So we thank you, Stephen, and it's a real honor to be here. It's hard to believe it's been 5 years. Yeah. Yeah, I remember during the COVID times being outside of places with you, and yeah. So this is really great. So I know I'm rambling on, but I don't know. I know it's just so exciting to see this. When you see something, when it first comes from an idea to fruition, and now we're actually growing even more. And to have Jennifer, the head of it, and some of the rest of you on this board, and the names I just heard, it's amazing. I mean, another doer, somebody just terrific. And I was so thrilled when I heard she was getting involved and going to be, part of this and growing it even more. Because we, on the Economic Foundation, we just plant the seeds, and it's everyone else that has to make it grow. So it's just awesome. I'm just so honored to be here. So thank you for inviting me. Now I'm going to have Kathy Lenatra, my colleague here, to present a couple of citations. You want to come up, Stephen?
Thank you for joining me up here. I will not ramble on as my colleague just did. I'm only kidding. And I said hello to everyone earlier because I was here much earlier, but that's okay. No.
Sorry.
We're very busy this time of year. But I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to my two friends in front of me for teaching me new things every day, and I really appreciate it. And I am so happy to present to you a citation from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Usually I don't have my glasses, and Matt holds it for me, but I was good this time. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the House of Representatives, be it hereby known to all that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers its sincerest congratulations to Stephen Delbos in recognition of your contributions to foster an appreciation for literary arts, is he right behind me? Okay, inspire creativity, and enrich lives with the power and beauty of poetry. As the town of Plymouth's first poet laureate from April 2020 to February 2024, the entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all your endeavors. And it's given today, the 29th day of February, which makes it very special because it's leap year, right? Yeah. Signed by the Speaker of the House, Ronald Mariano, one of your favorite state representatives, Matthew Muratori, and your other favorite state representative, Kathy Lenatra. Congratulations. I read the most important one first because that is from the House of Representatives. Exactly. But Senator Moran was unable to be with us today, so she has also wanted to give you this official citation from the State Senate. Be it hereby known that the Massachusetts Senate hereby extends its congratulations to Stephen Delbos in recognition of your time serving as the Town Poet Laureate from 2020 to 2024. And be it further known that the Massachusetts Senate extends its best wishes for continued success, that this citation be duly signed by the President of the Senate and attested to, and a copy thereof transmitted by the Clerk of the Senate. And that is signed by the President of the Senate, the Clerk of the Senate, and your state senator, Senator Moran, and that is also a February 29th. So these are extra special for you, and I'm going to give you a hug.
You want Kathy in or out?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I will just, I'll read in a minute, but it is an honor. I'm humbled and thrilled, really, and surprised, to be honest. So thank you very much.
Stefan, and hi everyone attending the Plymouth, Massachusetts Poet Laureate handover event and readings today. I'm Rosemary Corlett. I'm the Poet Laureate for Plymouth, Devon. I'm really excited and very thankful to Stefan for inviting me to contribute today. I have really valued the connection between our two Plymouths and our two programs, and I'm really looking forward to that connection continuing. I'd love to share a poem with you today, and I hope that in some small way it might welcome the new laureate into their post and help kick things off for them. This was a poem that was commissioned a few weeks ago as part of Plymouth City Council, and the theme of the poem was the fragility of freedom. So this is my interpretation of the theme, and the poem's called Freedom. I hope you enjoy. Hold freedom the way your neighbour clears the ice flakes from his windscreen. Each morning he handles the snow the way you'd brush a child's hair. His body still going at that strange pace of reverence reserved for the earliest gestures of the day, when your hands still want to be birds, when your body wants to be like partial light. Drive freedom home like the first journey you took from hospital with your newborn baby in the back. Do you remember that February night, feeling the cold rush in as the automatic hospital doors opened? Imagine cradling freedom with the same confusion, a confusion you'd never known until that moment. What will I do with this warm, unruined life, out here in the dark with the night in my lungs? Carry freedom like this, like the sunrise on a train, the odd car moving positively along the road parallel to the track, its back wheels churning up rounded sprays of last night's heavy rain. Soft light hung through the empty trees, birds here and there.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the board. Congratulations to Bill and Miriam. Really looking forward to the reading. Rosemary said Stefan, which is the British pronunciation of my name, which is Stephen, just so you know. I'll read a few poems. I'd like to revisit some poems that I've written over the course of the laureateship, but I'll start with a paragraph rather than a poem as a kind of disclaimer. Poetry is old, poetry is new, poetry is always now. When we engage with poetry, we are using one of the first tools that humans thought to invent. How many other tools do we still use so long after their initial creation? Fire, the wheel, the blade, the poem. In some ways, poetry has changed very little since its first appearance thousands of years ago. But in other ways, poetry is remade every day by every poet. Writing and reading poetry allows us to touch history while also remaking our relationship with the world around us. At the same time, poetry teaches us about ourselves. As Daniel Webster wrote in his Plymouth oration, delivered here in 1820, quote, Poetry bears us from ourselves and absorbs us in an intense interest for what shall happen to the generations after us. It speaks only in the language of our nature and affects us with sentiments which belong to us as human beings. So I'll be exploring some of those sentiments tonight. And the first poem is a poem that I wrote 4 years ago for the Laureateship and the reading that we did at the library. How many people were there at the library? Okay. Sorry for repeating myself, but one person did request, so there we have it. This is Poem for Plymouth Cordage. It starts with a quote from Reverend Gomes, Peter J. Gomes, and the quote is, "First we shape our story, and then our story shapes us." Poem for Plymouth Cordage. Help weave this heart rope, this cordage of wordage, woven memories, imagination, image, and nation, individuals' dreams, 400 years, 12,614,400,000 seconds. We weave the cordage of wordage, a rope across horizon, gathering every moment we find and write and tell the stories. We take the rope in dinghies and set off toward Europe. Others stay in Plymouth, weaving the rope we carry back eastward around the world, the words, the wars, the bombs, the tragedies and joys, the people, the love, the syllables make lifelines that keep us from drifting into the empty whirlpool of what's forgotten. A story, shivering pilgrims, all aboard over a month, 13 years from home, one birth, one death at sea, desperation, their daily ration, water, 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 waves, then Cape Cod cupped hand, a continent still big enough for everyone. For now, an etching in black and white, ink and paper, the contrast colors of their pauper clothes. When white men first came ashore and Wampanoag braves watched from shadowy pine patches, there was a mirror between them. Each saw the limits of their imagination reflected in the other. Protestants and the people of dawn, a mirror between them. No attack could shatter, only understanding to clarify. For 400 years, we must still try to clarify. We must find and learn and tell the stories. A story, we stand knee-deep on Brown's bank and stare into the gaping jaws of autumn. That summer fog swallowed the fireworks. That winter they dredged and dredged the harbor depths. We sledded Burial Hill. That spring was Ziggy's strawberry dipped. Stories woven into history. We shape and are shaped by our location. Plymouth, pliant mouth, always telling stories. The lips of language kiss the limits of recollection. Pumpkin comes from Popacan, meaning grows forth round. Wampanoag words, Massachusetts, place of the foothill. Plymouth from Plymouth, England, meaning mouth of the River Plym. A story, I was born on a coast's crooked shoulder, where gauze white waves sling shore and sand dunes frame dreams, where fishermen with missing thumbs used to huddle in fragrant fog from coffee mugs and briar pipes. Night floats the diving bell moon above a wooden flower docked in the harbor. Just now I am lying down to find sleep, reading the braille of stars over Plymouth. Who doesn't want the night sometimes to last forever, so dawn's thumb never swipes sky's screen? Who doesn't want to become the place where they are from? And so these words are stories, strands in the cordage we are weaving. We learn everything we can and share it. We are gathering and carrying this rope around the world. We set out eastwards from Plymouth, MA to UK, zigzag across all continents, collecting stories and sending them back to be woven, to keep us together, and everyone helps as we carry the rope under the Golden Gate, over the Rockies, across Ohio, and here we are at Old Exit 6, coming back into town to tie the knot where everything started, where this community is still telling its story. So where should we tie the knot? Where is the heart of your Plymouth? Thank you. I'll read two poems from a series of postcard poems, and these are kind of glimpses from around town and from my history with the town. It's 10 poems. I'll just read the first and the last. It begins at sunrise and ends in the nighttime. For Plymouth waking. Sunrise burns a bridge horizon to harbor. Fishing boats scratch glassy water. Low clatter of diesel engines. Gorelick Farm milk trucks down Court Street. Exhaust dispels local sleep. All across town, windows yawn. Night ebbs in this community in sea's sight, seizes another day. As time's ticker tape measures out just enough. For Plymouth lighthouses. Lampposts ignite Water Street nightly, but darkness still might be unfathomable for this town of no small renown. Just imagine that Puritan darkness. If not for lighthouses, those slow, silent sirens warning us of hope. Thank you very much. One of the most fulfilling projects I was able to be involved in with the laureateship was the dedication of the Whitehorse Beach accessibility path, the mat that allows the beach to be more accessible. And I was invited by Tajinia Pinchback to contribute a poem for the dedication 2 summers ago. So this is Dedication Whitehorse Beach Accessibility Path. We who know the sea's beauty have a simple duty, sharing our entry to immortal afternoons on sand by water. Ideal sunlit hours when identity melts and we can merge with air and light, simply existing. Let's all go together. Let's enable everyone to grow beyond limits set by our bodies. This diminutive desert does not have to be impossibly impassable. We can give each a path to reach their very own beach. That's why we lay this way to the waves from sidewalk to tide. So may it serve and may it dissolve the distance to joy. Thank you. I'll just read 2 more. Another very interesting project, we heard from Rosemarie, who's the new current poet laureate in Plymouth, England. But from 2016 to 2020, there was a poet laureate there named Tom Bolton. And we connected in 2020, the year that I started the laureateship. And we started sending poems back and forth, kind of corresponding through poetry, transatlantic cables, if you will. And we started by writing about the 400th, 1620 to 2020. But then basically almost the same month that I started the laureateship, COVID kicked off. Lockdowns happened and the poems started to go into these various other directions. I was lucky enough to visit Plymouth, England in December of 2023, and I met Tom for the first time, read with him, and met many other people in the community, including Rosemarie. And I wrote this poem as the kind of capstone, the final poem in about 15 that we wrote together back and forth. Each of them starts with a quote from Tom, and so this starts with a quote from a poem that he wrote, actually the night that we read together. And the quote is, "As I write this poem, we are in the same place." Tom Bolton. One more disclaimer. In England, you can drink beer in parks, so lest you think I was breaking the law. It mentions a few things. There's a famous statue in Plymouth, England of Sir Francis Drake, the explorer. Smeaton's Tower is the lighthouse on the coast there, the famous landmark. It mentions the poet Ted Hughes, one of Tom's favorite poets, great British poet, who had amazing hair. He was a really handsome guy. And so being there was very surreal, to stand on the coast in Plymouth, England, and look over the water at Plymouth, Massachusetts, as I had done so many times from here looking over there, was really very strange and interesting. And that's what this poem is about. I smack open a bottle of too much local lager. I smack open a bottle of local lager on the stone corner of a monument to Sir Francis Drake by Smeaton's Tower, lighthouse where two rivers converge. This Saturday night, the barely suppressed violence of England boiling out of pubs at my back. My Plymouth out there somewhere across dark water. Tonight we read together in one room, verses twining like sturdy old rope every land-sick sailor clings to. Down from London today on the train, a man with Ted Hughes hair across the aisle said, "I used to know this railway like my hand." Tom, we escaped rainy December bluster with fish and chips and Coke and coffee, complaining of life's increasing costs, revealing the actual Mayflower steps in the ladies' loo of the Admiral McBride pub on the Barbican. Buoys in the water off your Plymouth blink for me, with foreign rhythms, other messages than I'm used to, but they're close enough. And finally, someone asked me earlier, what I'm going to do now. And of course, I'm going to rest on my laurels. But I was reading about laurels the other day, and apparently when you cut laurels, they produce cyanide gas. And so there's many cases where people have trimmed laurel bushes in their backyard. They put the trimmings in the back seat, and driving to the dump, they pass out and crash their car. So maybe it's good to not hang on to the old laurels too long. Yeah. So, pass them on. And this poem's called Passing the Laurels. Once again, congratulations to Bill and to Miriam, and good luck. Passing the Laurels. From one poet to another, in sibilance, rhyme, and meter, take this page, a humble wish that every morning brings a splash of inspiration hour to hour across the timeline of your tenure. Sing us beyond time. Sing us away from merely accepting what we see. Guide us from here to poetry. Thank you very, very much.
So I want to thank Stephen. Take a moment to enjoy the fact that we've been honored with your poetry for the last 4 years. So thank you. He started out with everything shutting down, and we kind of fell flat on that. And so we felt tonight it was very important to honor you appropriately, and I think that the citations were pretty cool, right? So thank you again. And now I will wave a magic wand and turn the evening back to Meet the Finalists. We have two this evening, Bill Arienti and Miriam O'Neill. I did produce a written biography of both of them that we had circulated, so I do not feel I need to recite. However, I wanted to add a personal note when I bring Bill up onto the stage. I met him as a fellow town meeting member, and we had a wonderful conversation at a coffee shop in Manamet. And basically, as soon as you meet Bill, you just kind of fall in love with him because he just has such wonderful vibes. I have great respect as a retired firefighter, and as well as his challenges that he's faced in life. And I know his wife and family adore him. So this was a wonderful opportunity to share the fact that you love poetry. So please come up on the stage, Bill Arianti.
Good evening. First, I would like to thank the America's Hometown Laureate, Plymouth Laureate organization for having us and for putting this on. Poetry really is, it's an art and so much more. It's a way of life. If I could tell you a little bit about myself first. As Jennifer had mentioned, I was a Quincy firefighter for 32 years. I was the son of a Quincy firefighter as well. But I'll get into that a little more in a second. As a child, my first introduction to poetry was Sister Lois standing in front of a window as the first snow of November was falling, telling us, reciting the Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. And as she spoke, she painted a picture that I could see with words, and it had never happened before. And it was just amazing to me how, as she was speaking, it just brought everything into perspective. From then on, I just used to dabble in poetry as a kid just to write it, and I enjoyed writing it. What it did is it gave me pause. It gave me the opportunity to sit back and just relax as I was writing. And it made sense of the world a little more, that I would be able to see things and write things down the way that I saw them. As I said, my father passed away when I was 18. And I grew up, became a firefighter, had a family. And on 9/11, all the thoughts that I had from my father passing away as a firefighter came back to me, rushing back. And I began to think that although I got some jewelry, I got some, words of advice from him as a child, I didn't have anything tangible. What I decided to do was I wanted to make sure that my son didn't have that. He had something from me for the rest of his life, something that he could live by. So I decided at Christmas of 2001, instead of buying him a new truck or a new toy or a video game, I decided to write him a book. And I wrote it, and on Christmas Eve, I read it to him through my tears. And he loved it. And he said, "Dad, could you write me another?" I said, "I'll give it a try." So I did, and I wrote him a second. And after that, he said, "Dad, can you write another?" I said, "Sure." I said, let's talk about it. So I took him for a walk up in Faxon Park in Quincy, where I grew up. And as we were walking through the woods, I saw that the playgrounds that I used to play in, the woods, the forest, were gone through development. And I said, this is what I have to do. So I began writing him a series of poems about Faxon Park and the woodland creatures in Faxon Park. In each separate poem was a different life lesson of how to live your life. So if anything did happen to me, he had this. So he took, unbeknownst to me, he took the books to school, took the poems to school, and I was contacted by his teacher saying, "You've got to do something with these. These are just too good to not put out." And if anyone has tried to publish children's poetry, it's tough. You have to have an agent, and an agent won't take you unless you're published. So there's a vicious cycle. So I published them, I just printed them on my own into book form. And I went around to schools. And I spoke to the children, and I spoke to the teachers, and especially in the pre-K and kindergarten and first and second grade, you would have rambunctious children, and you would sit down and try to read to them and try to explain, but it was tough. And then I would start reading the poems. And after the first line, second line, they continued to be rambunctious, but once I finished the first stanza, they began to sit down. And halfway through the second stanza, they were sitting there fully attentive, anticipating the next line. And it was then I said that poetry is, I learned that it's more of an entertainment form. It's more than just telling someone a story. This should be a vehicle in the educational process. Bring it into the schools. Let the schools use poetry to teach children history, English, even mathematics. Take it that step further. And that's why I think it's often taken for granted. And I'd like to just read a little thing here that I came up with. It's poets see the same things that others see, but see them differently. They see the beauty in the mundane. They acknowledge special aspects in everyday life that others take for granted. They then craft their observations into words to give people an opportunity to join in their celebration of the enchantment of the world around us. Poetry exposes and enlightens. It explains, comforts, and enhances. It gives people pause, a chance to see something they've seen or felt 1,000 times over, but see it with a new set of eyes or from a different point of view. If a poem, or even one line of a poem, can make someone see something a little differently, something that they've seen 1,000 times, but look at it a very different way of light, then the poem, as well as the poet, no matter the level of fame or obscurity, is a success. So I have, thank you. Thank you very much. I have two short poems I like to read, and then to read the one about Plymouth, specifically for Plymouth. This one I call Manomet, and it's dedicated to the street on where I live. On this cliff I sit with purpose, watching waves roll upon the surface, keeping treasures deep below, hiding secrets that no one can know. I sit in silence all alone upon my perch of jagged stone, and the secrets that I tend to save, I hear set free upon the crashing waves. These ocean currents cleanse my mind, waves free my soul, and let me unwind. Releasing the chaos I've gathered inside, expunging the secrets I took such pains to hide. I'm refreshed during the special time, my psyche relaxed, my body sublime. Rejuvenation reigns from this short stay, and with renewed inspiration, I walk away. And this one I called Dawn. As I said, I grew up in Quincy, and I had to live by the water. And when I found a piece of land, I fell in love with it, and I built a house on, and it overlooks Cape Cod Bay. So through my sleep-filled eyes, I see the burgeoning day that is to be. The sky, void of color, slowly changes its hue from a lifeless black to a promising blue. It's at this point where earth meets heaven, an amber glow begins to leaven, where the spectacular reflection off Cape Cod Bay, welcoming the opportunities of a brand new day. As the orange sphere begins its rise, I wipe the sleep out from my eyes. For not even in our vast imagination, regardless of our level of jubilation, could one create a vision of splendor on earth, more glorious than another day's birth. With the sun illuminating another day of life, disappointments fade, along with the setbacks, with past setbacks and strife. For with the magnificent rise of the sun each day, new hopes and opportunities are put into play, where possibilities galore to us are presented, to raise the spirits of the happy and console those discontented, to offer each of us yet another chance to rise above, achieve, and hopefully advance. It lets us offer contrition to those we may have offended, as we all have damaged fences that need to be mended. Time passes quickly as the sun travels its path without care of its future or aftermath. For much like the long shadows the bright sun may cast are the remnants and the memories of our own days past. The past holds good memories, but also makes us lament some recollections within that we may resent. These shadows of life past create our own private hell, and so therefore in the shadow of the past it is best we not dwell. And tomorrow it is certain that the sun again will appear, but tomorrow are the chambers that hold all our fears. And looking forward to the sun of a future day, which is our present moments of this time away. Wish not away these precious seconds in which we now live, but rather embrace the excitement and the gifts they may give. For nothing more than this moment in life we are guaranteed to live and enjoy before the soul from our body is freed. Live for today each moment in utter splendor, and your care and happiness may you never need to surrender. For what makes your life truly worth living is loving, caring, and always forgiving. By bringing happiness into the lives you may meet, will fill your day with gladness and make life complete. And as the day turns to evening and the hours grow late, it's the stars dancing in the sky that we may now celebrate. Thank you. Now, finally, this is the one that I wrote specifically for tonight. I was asked to write a poem about Plymouth. Plymouth has so much to offer, and I didn't want the poem that I write to ever be co-opted by another town with a beautiful seaside or forests or ponds. So I wrote this in a different light. This is my gift to Plymouth because in the 5 years that I've lived here, Plymouth has given so much to me. Upon an honored place, he stands with dignity. He stands with pride. His image surveying Patuxent, where land meets sea. His gaze is east, somehow knowing of the impending arrival of those coming from another land with a hope of living free. In December, he watched them come ashore in longboats from their ship. Helpless were they in this climate and unlikely to endure. With compassion for their plight, he engaged these travelers in March, and through his assistance, their survival would be ensured. His name was Usamequin of the Pokanoket tribe. To his people, the great sachem Massasoit was he known. He shared this land, his land, with those who came from afar, and for 50 years their bond had only grown. He taught them how to fish. He taught them how to hunt. He taught them the ways of farming a sandy soil. He showed them how to use the fish they caught to fertilize the land. And by his guidance, the new farms flourished through pilgrims' toil. Today, his likeness stands in Plymouth in a prominent location. But much like his contributions, it is often unobserved. Although hidden amongst the trees of historical interpretation, the gifts of Massasoit gave to Plymouth must forever be preserved. Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, and now I would like to bring up Miriam O'Neill, who, again, on a personal note, I worked very closely with during my tenure at Plymouth Public Library. We were involved in a poetry program with Quincy College and the Sheriff's Department. I had regular readings, and I would ask Miriam to come. She also is chair or in charge of Poetry, the Art of Words, which at this point, in my experience, is the most active poetry club in Plymouth. So that's the place I guide anyone that I meet regarding poetry if they're interested, and we have regular monthly meetings and readings at the Art Center now. So I'd like to thank Miriam for her friendship and bring her up for her finalist reading.
Thanks. Thank you, Bill. And thank you to the committee. Thank you all for coming. And make sure, if you can't hear me, you tell me. I've been told I sometimes get off the mic. I have a handful of poems that I'd like to read for you, and ending with 2 that I wrote for Plymouth, especially for tonight. And if you're interested in poetry, the art of words, see me after the show. Anyway, I have these few poems that I'd like to read. This is called Natural Law, and it references Schoolhouse Field, which, if you know Clifford Road that goes through Chiltonville, the big field on the right as you're coming from the beach and going south, that's called Schoolhouse Field because there used to be a little schoolhouse on it. Natural Law. A button buck grazes in Schoolhouse Field. The school's been gone 100 years, and cedars, once replaced by hay, have begun to reclaim it. The wild hops in the woods are yellow now, and purple asters, frosted brown from early snow. Night spreads its cloak, and the buck fades to black. We turn for home as rain begins, carry the deer, the dark, the cloud-crowded sky with us into the kitchen where lamplight shines in the water dish, and the pilot on the oven clicks. We leave a trail of mottled leaves, we leave a trail of mottled, rotting leaves from boot and paw, a bit of wildness. This is how we live now. These are the rules. Walk awake, be kind. We are only here so long. And Stephen read a postcard poem, so I'm going to read a postcard poem, copycat. This is postcard Sardinia, if you've ever been to Sardinia. It's an amazing place. The cliffs along the coast are covered in white thistles and speckled with goats, whose bells sing little syncopated songs as they cross the road, while all the cars wait and the drivers stare at this view. Today, I drove to the end of the road, or should I say, as far as the road could take me. There is much left alone here, which I like, which I think you would like too. Come with me next time. We'll drink Cananao, it's good for the heart, and we'll eat goat milk pecorino. We'll sit together above the sea and listen as the bells pleasure the wind. The blessing. This mentions Saginaw, and in the 1960s, during the Vietnam War and into the 70s, Saginaw was where Navy recruits were sent to boot camp. I don't know where they're sent now, but that's where my brother went. The blessing. The night my father kissed my brother Pat on the neck, it was summer, and the crescent moon had already set, and we were sitting up late on the patio, singing something from Carousel, maybe Mr. Snow, or maybe If I Loved You. And a car rolled in the driveway, headlights dark, engine cut, and my father flew out of his chair and ran down the path, so we ran too. And there was Pat, in his navy blues, cap flat on his head, home from Saginaw. And our father came up behind him, arms open to take him in, and he kissed the only part of our brother he could reach that way, the nape of his neck. He kissed him. And then it was over, and years would pass, and they would leave this earth without another touch between them. But I carry them the way they were that night. Father kissing son, son leaning in to take the blessing. It's funny that Bill read a Manomet poem because I grew up in Manomet. We moved to Manomet when I was 2, and that was a long time ago. And I wrote a poem. Manomet is a Wampanoag word, by the way. And I've been working around this fact that Manomet is a Wampanoag word, and it stuck. It stayed. We kept it. And I wanted to just give a shout out to Jessie Little Doe Baird, who is a linguist from the Wampanoag tribe who took the time to go get a master's in linguistics at MIT and then go back to the Cape to reclaim the Wampanoag language. And I worked with some of her dictionary to write this poem. And I want to thank the Plymouth Public Library's Plymouth Room for their hosting me while I did this work. Excuse me, the collections room. I've been reprimanded. Manomet in Winter. And these poems, these 2 poems are about language. Manomet in Winter. To explain it, I would have to say, white beside dark clouds will fall across the edge of pines and the mouth of the small tidal river. It will fall where the rocks are cleft, and on the bad bog as on the miry place, it will cover the place of burden, which is not exactly what the ancestors of this land would say. They might only have glanced up at the flannel-colored sky, remarking, "Mufu," and the listener would know. If I tell you we kayaked along the great tidal river or hiked to the Great Spirit's rocks or to the old field, will you hear Kataquat, Manitou, Chisawamik? Would you know that we traveled to the end of the small pond, the abode of the owl or of the crane? Do you hear Titikat, Mahutset, Taihanet? Language worked another way for those far from their own ancestral home who sailed across the water, used strings on strings of syllables, and claimed places as if they weren't already named for what they were or what happened through the seasons there. Soon each place, known once by how it served, became a place subsumed by this new claiming, as if each new naming changed what it was. Centuries passed, and in the 1950s, along Whitehorse Beach, cottages sat cheek to cheek, some made of Army surplus Quonset huts done up as summer escapes. Quonset, an Algonquin word for small, long space. Places named Doll's House, Seahorse, Our Idyll, planted in the sand like little summer caravans, named for how one felt far from Boston in August or July. And for years, no one thinking of the tidal stream or how the brackish pond behind the dunes would change as the leaching fields overflowed. And even later in the 1960s, as Russians trawled the bay, they did. Through Cold War waters, the sun still rose and spread its gold, and at night, the scuset, phosphorescence, still spangled the shore. Long ago, across the sea in Ireland, my own ancestors' land had been renamed. Each sleeve and blar became a mount or field, each bit of history unbuckled from its gods and made to entertain as lore of wee folk and fairies the claimers shared. When she landed in Boston, speaking the Queen's English, my Graham's bones still carried all the words that made a farm, her home. Still heard the name, Finnegas, and Finn curl in her ears. Knew how the great salmon of knowledge took Finn's hook and how by accident the young poet ate the fish. Knew how the strangers came and carried Ireland's food away in ships to feed their own. She came knowing the Choctaw out beyond their trail of tears once sent $170 to the Gaels in Ireland that they might feed their children. She called my brother Bachelban, sweet blue-eyed boy, but we girls were Colleen Whedon if we didn't listen, silly names for silly kids. She gave us what she had left of Irish, that and bread. Now when I go to Galway, to her old land, I feel the need to hold what words I can on my tongue, like a blessed host or blackberry picked from thorns in sunshine after heavy rain. Friends, look at the old maps. See the place where new corn is planted between the rows of older corn, and where the heaps of fish for fertilizing corn are kept, and beyond the field's edge of the small pines, how each place was a name before a new claim for it was made. See how far from the fort lies Manomet, place of burden, the praying town among the ponds over the steep hill. Tonight, the clouds have gathered across the darkling sky, and soon we all can tell it will come. Mufu, Shnakta, snow. I'm moving. Okay, I have two more poems for you, and then we're out of town. Out of time. Okay, following on Stephen's wonderful cordage poem, I thought a lot about cordage, but I came at it from a different way, and this is called Ropes and Words, language again. I'm hoping you can tell the story that's from the poem so I don't have to tell the story. That's the idea. Ropes and words. They carry the old world on their tongues, elisions, idioms for fish and foods and places, up and down row house back stairs on Spooner Street, words flavored by the old country, sung in prayer or flung as insults. Even as they leaned into English, there were tootlings and brodo. Maybe some salumi tucked inside or a bit of pork, mouthfuls of ranazzo, a place which no one in Plymouth seemed to know, causing some new emigres to claim Bologna as home. After all, how many not from there in 1895 or 1910 could find Cento or even Ferraro on a map? It didn't matter. The people of Ranazzo mingled with the Germans and the Portuguese, everyone making rope. Some at the flyer, some at the twist, or playing baseball in July, or sliding on the frozen pond, their English gathering momentum, while the old tongues held in private places. The past layered in between the new, a kind of thread reaching back across the time to lost rooms, places where Il Duce's great plan meant to erase every word until only Italian remained. Each citizen only allowed to be whatever Mussolini said they were, except that here, beyond his reach, the old language, relic, reminder of Cento's history, almost lost, lived on. Though now Italian dictionaries don't list this dialect, it exists because here we are free to keep our words. Each one a small prayer we drop in another's ears, a small gift of where we came from. Now, the old place in Emilia-Romagna has its own new immigrants from Asia, Africa, parts of the EU, even a few Americans call it home. A new migration carrying its own verbal savor from other shores. Who knows? Maybe in 100 years, the streets of Cento will fill with new phrases from other worlds, their meanings teased into a thread, braided and twined into a kind of modern Esperanto that binds all those new citizens to their new home, a new language wound out of the old into a new rope of words. Okay, don't forget to tip your waitress. This is the last poem, and it's light verse. And I hope you get the story. It's a narrative. A story in verse dedicated to Francis Billington. A boy named Francis climbed a tree and saw west of where the village stood water, bright through dappling leaf, and thinking it a great discovery said of that shining place, "There lies a sea." In England, his father, John, had married Eleanor, whose surname is forgot, and sired 9 descendants, all of whom Plymouth's elders thought it best to foster out to other homes for their own good. As some weakness of character in their parents stood between those 9 and flourishing. But even before landing on New England's shore, young Billington had made his mark, firing his squib aboard the tiny ark, starting a fire. The governor was known to muse aloud how such elements as John and Eleanor had found their way among the pious pilgrims. So often did they sin. Slander sent her to the stocks, and he was tied neck to heels for refusing to follow orders. And when the worst crime finally occurred, and John Billington was hanged for murder, young Francis watched. How does a boy grow up clear of wildness in the blood after seeing such? We know the newer Billingtons grew to be steadfast and right. The rogue and devilry of their parents filtered out. And so we leave to lore the story of that western sea, named for its discoverer, where blue herons and wild geese flare across the water west of town, on the way to Carver, then to Middleborough, where Francis and his wife Christian settled down.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our evening tonight. Thank you so much for coming. But before you go home, we really want to encourage you to visit one of our fine dining establishments in this community. Did you know that there are over 12,000 restaurant seats in Plymouth? You didn't know that, did you? I only just learned it myself. I would really encourage you to please visit one of those seats and occupy them this evening. Jennifer, is there anything you'd like to mention also?
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone. We do need to exit quickly because there's a movie coming in, so I think your coat rack is outside. But if you want to chat a bit and finalize any purchases, go back to the Gainsborough room, and then you can exit that way. But otherwise, thank you and drive safely.
And all purchases support the Plymouth Poet Laureate program and our Poet Laureates tonight.
Yes.
One more big round of applause for our artists. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Marion.